How's it going, everyone? Tommy here. Back to do another one of these little ranty videos or whatever you want to call it. Used to do these a lot more regularly, then kind of stopped for a while. But yeah, figured I'd start doing them again. Probably not as regularly, just maybe just as things come to me. So if you're not familiar with these, if you haven't seen one of these before, yeah, it's basically just me sitting down, sharing some thoughts about Christianity, faith, religion from my perspective now as a former believer and current atheist, and just what I think about different arguments, apologetics, ideas like from the Bible and Christian faith and all that. So, figured, Easter weekend would be a good time to start doing more of these, especially because the idea that's been on my mind that I just really wanted to get my thoughts out about is this, and I hesitate calling it an argument. I don't know if it's necessarily meant to be an argument or just response or even rebuttal, refutation. I don't know. A thing that people say when atheists, skeptics, non-believers, whatever, such as myself, when wondering why God doesn't show up more or just become more obvious, the old define hiddenness problem. Basically, well, God made us and apparently wants a relationship with us, whether it's the Christian God or just any kind of spiritual idea about some creator deity that loves us. This really only works for like the relational kind of deity or those forms of theism. Because like, yeah, something like deism, it's like, yeah, God who just created us didn't really give a shit and just fucked off. Yeah, then that makes sense. But for a response I've heard from people, whether Christian or just spiritual, non-religious, but still theistic, um, will say things like, "Well, can a painter enter their painting, or can an author enter their book?" Like, no, of course not, and that would be ridiculous, and therefore it's ridiculous for us to expect to see God because that's what He is. He created this world, but it's on like a whole different plane of existence or realm of reality or whatever you want to call it. We're the natural, He's the supernatural, and so on. So it just doesn't make sense to actually see Him here with us. So yeah, it's almost presented if it's just like a silly or ridiculous idea. Um, like I said, I've heard this from several people going all the way back to when I was heavily deconstructing and kind of on my way through the whole deconversion process, talking with mainly more progressive Christians, but also people who had kind of left the whole religion thing, but were still theistic or spiritual or whatever, and believed in some kind of loving relational God, like would say that these kinds of things to me. Most recently heard it from comedian Pete Holmes, and by the way, this is like no shade or not supposed to be like an attack on Pete or anything like that. I love him. I think he's hilarious. I think he's a great comedian. But yeah, this is just something he released on a recent video as a promo for a new special or something he has coming up. But yeah, so just hearing it again just kind of irked me. So I was like, just need to let these thoughts out now. So here you go. You're welcome. But yeah, just to me, like I said, I kind of hesitate calling it an argument because I don't know if it's necessarily meant to be presented that way, or maybe if so, maybe it's just more like subconsciously. I don't know, but it seems to be presented almost as if it should have the effect of an argument or refutation. It's basically just saying, for those of us who expect to see some kind of evidence of God, saying, "Oh, well, that's wrong. You really shouldn't," because, like I said, painter can't enter the painting, author can't enter the book, whatever. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll try to see how brief I can keep this. One of the first things that came to mind, because from basically the first time I ever heard this response, I just immediately found it completely not compelling at all. It's like one of the first things that came to my mind is, okay, well, it works for those kinds of analogies, but there are other analogies of a person making a thing but still being able to enter and interact with it. I mean, first thing that came to mind was, well, a builder can still enter their building, or an automaker can still enter their car, or a shipbuilder can still enter their ship, and so on and so on. A filmmaker can enter their movie. Things like that. You see that all the time. Um, So yeah, to me, it's just like, okay, you made an analogy, but other analogies don't work the same way. So why are you just focusing on those? Like, for those who have watched these past videos of mine, you may remember I use this term a lot when it comes to these sorts of arguments, especially in Christian apologetics. But to me, this analogy just seems so ad hoc. Like, it's just created for the moment for this particular argument, not because there's any actual evidence that this is the case, but if I put it this way, then it makes it make sense. So yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily question begging, because it involves, like, you kind of have to assume the conclusion to support the premise, and that this is that kind of situation where that we have a painter at all in this painting of ours, and then that is the case, that this is a painting, and then, oh, so of course then that makes sense. But you have yet to establish painter or painting. All we have is reality, and it doesn't seem to include this one thing that theists want to say is a part of the greater reality, if that makes sense. So that's why I said, like, I hesitate to call it an argument because, like I said, I don't know if people necessarily mean it that way, but it also just doesn't work as an argument. Like, it's just an analogy. As so, you would have to already establish that we are in that kind of situation, and then explain to someone, "Oh, this is why it works that way because this is our situation." Like, oh, of course, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, but just starting from why don't we see God? It's like, well, it's because people in a book can't see the author. It's like, okay, yeah, that's true, but you haven't established that we're in that kind of situation. You know what I mean? But another way I think this whole line of thinking just completely falls flat is specifically in a more like traditional Christian sense. Like, and I have heard this, like I said, I have heard this from Christians. Like, I don't know how you can say, well, a painter can't enter their painting when you believe that's literally what God did, like, just all throughout the Bible, but especially, again, this being Easter weekend, like, what are we celebrating? God literally entering into our painting as the person of Jesus. And then, dying, resurrecting, teaching, hanging out, drinking wine, eating fish, all that stuff. So for a Christian to say, well, a painter can't enter their painting, like, that's why we don't see God. I mean, that's just ridiculous on its face to me. But then going beyond Christianity, like, if you're just generally a theist, but like I said, not religious, but just more spiritual, but you still believe that there is this creator deity out there who loves us. To me, if you think that they want any kind of relationship with us, to me, like, to make it, if you want to actually argue that this is the situation, that they're just on a completely different plane and they created this physical world that they can't enter, to me, like, if they actually wanted to relate to us and for us to know that they exist, that seems like a really dumb choice, to be perfectly honest. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you create reality such that these creatures of yours that you made and love so much can't actually perceive you, and you can't be there with them to have any kind of, like, love or relationship or anything like that? Just seems so bizarre to me that such a god would do that. But another analogy that was actually given by a friend of mine, Ember, who, if you've noticed this snazzy flag behind me, the space ally flag, you can, you can, she made this. Yeah. And Ember has a whole website with, like, other pride flags with space themed. So yeah, check out astralpride.com. So thank you, Ember, for the flags and for this analogy I'm about to share of hers. She said it's also like, not only can, a builder enter their building, or an automaker can enter their car or whatever, but also, like, a parent can re- reveal themselves to their child and actually be there. Because I love the parent child analogy, one, because Christianity uses it so much, but also it also works to refute and dismantle so many of the ideas and arguments from Christianity. Like this, like I said, whether it's Christian or not, even if you just have any kind of idea of God as a loving creator that wants a relationship with us of any kind, like what what kind of parent, if we actually could control this, and I'm a parent, I would never do something like this where, obviously, like when we have kids, they are born into our reality. So, like, we share this space of reality with them. But if we, for some reason, had the ability to choose for our children to be born and they go straight into a completely separate reality that we can't interact with or enter into, like, what good parent in their right mind would choose that? But you're telling me that this loving deity made things this way on purpose. I don't know. It kind of seems like it looks the same way whether that happened or if there just is no God. Like, both of these realities seem to look the same if you're telling me that that's how it is. If that this creator made things this way. Yeah, another term I use a lot, unfalsifiable, seems to be falls in that camp as well. So, but yeah, like I said, so Christian, non-Christian, just any kind of theistic belief about a loving creator God, but for some reason made reality this way that they couldn't enter into it. Yeah, to me, just makes no sense. Just one, if that is the case. But then again, it's just an analogy. It's not actually an argument. You first have to establish that this is the case and then present it to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because if we got to the point where we actually all did agree, it's like, yes, we are in a painting, as it were, and we understand how paintings work. The painter can't enter in. Okay, that makes sense. But until you've actually established that that's the case, you can't just say, oh, well, that's why we can't see God because it's like this. It's like, well, how do you know it's like this? We don't, bottom line, I guess. So, yeah, I think I just feel like I'm maybe just rambling at this point. Maybe I have been the whole time. Yeah. But yeah, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear some more of your thoughts. Maybe something someone says, like in response to this, might jog my memory of some other things I maybe meant to say, because there's always things I forget to say in these videos. So please, if you have more thoughts, questions, pushback, agreements, whatever, let me know. And like I said, hopefully be doing these a little more often. Definitely not regularly, but yeah, when the mood strikes me. So, right. Thanks for hanging out and listening to me ramble. So, see you around.